Welcome back to the Chosen Life podcast with your host, Jonathan, the Chosen Lawyer. And our guest today is the world's second best lawyer, Mr. David Korman, who's actually the first. David, welcome back to the Chosen Life.
Well, thanks so much for having me back, Jonathan. I've got the shirt to prove it. So there you go. Second best in the world. That's pretty damn good as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you know that there's a whole reference to this stuff. Obviously, I didn't get that custom made. I was down in New Mexico on a road trip, and I found the Breaking Bad store. And being a big fan of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, I go into the shop there. They have a ton of memorabilia and all sorts of stuff from the set and the costumes. It's incredible there. And then I noticed that they got the mug for World's Best Lawyer, which is what Saul Goodman had. And
Right.
then they had the travel mug where his girlfriend Kim got him World's Best Lawyer and crossed it out, and it World's Second Best Lawyer because she's the best lawyer, obviously. And sure enough, they had them as T-shirts, and I said, "What's a better way to give a present to my friend David, but to call him the world's second best lawyer?" And not everybody would be willing to accept that, but you know what? I knew you'd take it in good jest, so hey, you're wearing the shirt proudly.
Hey, the world is filled with many, many lawyers, as we know. Being number two is not so bad. Not so bad. It could be a lot worse.
You know what? Even from a liability standpoint, I don't know if I want to be called the second best lawyer because that's still a big onus to fill. So
Yeah.
before we start today, our agenda and topic today, late breaking news because we're going to talk about lawyering today, and those people that, oh, you know what, if I don't make it in life, maybe I'll just go to law school and I'll become a lawyer. That seems to be everybody's backup plan. But before we get to that, late breaking news on the Maple Leafs front. Turns out the Maple Leafs did not fire their coach Kyle Dubas. They did. They did
Sheldon
not.
Keefe.
Sorry, I mistake with the GM. Correct, Sheldon
Yes.
Keefe. I keep mixing up the two. That's so funny because it's so intertwined, right?
Yeah.
So Keefe was not let go. He wasn't going to play out the 1 year. They actually extended him today, even though his buddy, the GM, is gone, Mr. Dubas.
Yeah.
Was that a surprise to you, David?
No, I'm not really surprised. He has a great record so far as a coach. And, he's a young guy. He hasn't coached at the NHL level before the Leafs, but the Leafs as a franchise have never won more games regular season. In playoffs, a different picture, but in the regular season, they've been really good. They've been a top five team, top 16. Like no doubt they've been a contender every year. So some of that goes to the GM, some credit for assembling a team, but some of that also goes to the coach. Because here you got a young guy, first time NHL coach, and he's got a better record than the Mike Babcocks of the world and all the more storied coaches in the history of the Leafs. So it's hard to discredit him. And I think they also recognize the second they let him go, he's picked up by another team, probably a team competing with them. So, yes, he's got to figure out how to get them over the hump in the playoffs, but the whole organization's got to figure that out. And some of it's on the coach, some of it's on the GM, some of it's just on the players. So, if you get rid of the coach, it sort of gives the players a bit of a free pass. Oh, it wasn't us. It was, our coach was out coached by, the Tampa coach and the Carolina coach. And every year there's a different coach that's out coaching them. But or the Florida coach last year. But the reality is it's on the players. And I think bringing back the coach who's got a good record, not a bad move. Because otherwise, who are you replacing him with? Who's the young bright guy you're replacing him with? Or you're just retreading somebody. You want another Mike Babcock to come in.
He's already been taken.
You want Daryl Sutter to come in, and completely destroy the morale in the dressing room. What's the next choice?
So I got $1 million question for you. What in their thinking, deep down, did part of you say to yourself, this is partly also just so Dubas doesn't get his hands on him when he becomes a free agent because he already checked the Leaf scouting area. They've already, started to take employees. Maybe this is also because the ending did not finish so nicely with him. Maybe we retain him kind of despite Dubas. Did that go into your logic at all?
Yeah, except they've got a pretty good coach in Pittsburgh, who's actually won. But like every coach, they have a shelf life, and maybe they do decide, hey, there's a good candidate available. Maybe we need to bring in somebody else. So, but if not Pittsburgh, somewhere he would have been. If they got rid of him when Dubas left, he'd be coaching somewhere else in the NHL this season. He's not an old guy that's going to be sitting around for a couple of years, doing it, hockey night in Canada. Like someone to be picking him up because everybody's looking for the young coaches that can relate to today's players. I don't think they want, mind you, Babcock got another job, so it always surprises me, like how like there's only like 35 guys in the whole world that could coach in the NHL, and 30 of them get a job every year.
And
Like it's
and John
32.
Tortorella's still around too. Like you never know. You never know.
Yeah, yeah.
So this kind of segues me now into the practice of law, because one of those things that, when any field you're in, when you have experience, knowledge, proven winner, even if people don't like you, if you have proven results, people still find a way to get those positions. But it seems the more people like you, the more likely it is that you're going to stay around, especially in this day and age. When someone's considered a player's coach, they're tough, but they're fair, but people want to play hard for you. They're going to stick around. And that's one of the things I tell a lot of people when they tell me, hey, I think I want to become a lawyer, is I tell them, you don't get that experience or knowledge overnight. That comes with time. And when you're starting off in any kind of field, it can be a grind. And if you are going to do that grind, you better like that grind. And I think I'm going to jump into mistake number one, I think that people make when becoming a lawyer is they never really thought about what it was going to be like to be a lawyer. They just said, I watched it on TV, can't be that hard. And then they just sign up to law school. They write the LSAT, and lo and behold, they get in. Somewhere along the line during law school, they're like, wow, this is not for me at all. Some figured out during bar school, and some figured out during articling or practicing. So I think one of the first things I think, David, from a young person's perspective, I tell them is, you think about becoming a lawyer, maybe actually find out what it's like to become a lawyer. Maybe go sit in on some law school classes or go shadow a lawyer for a couple of days. You may find it's not as glamorous as you think.
Yeah, no, good points. Part of it is a problem with our system. First of all, to your point about what are they watching on TV or in movies, you're going to see criminal law lawyers, you're going to see litigation lawyers, trial lawyers. It might extend into family law. You're not seeing real estate lawyers like me and you closing transactions and getting people, signing up documents and drafting things, and like there's no transactional shows because you would never get an audience. So they're not going to learn what you and I do for a living by watching TV. That's for sure. The other place they're not going to learn how to do it is in law school. Okay. Now, it's been a few years since I left law school. Same thing for you, my friend. But like, were you taught anything in law school that was really going to teach you how to close a commercial transaction or a house transaction for that matter? You learned basic property law principles and underlying things. You didn't learn the day-to-day hands-on process of what actually goes on in a law firm and what a lawyer does all day in our field, for sure.
I tell people all the time, the law school admission test, the LSAT, and we're based out of Ontario, Canada. I think it's going to apply to pretty much North America, maybe anywhere in the world, really. But the test doesn't prove you're going to be a lawyer. It proves you can write that test. That's all it does. Because if you take all the applicants with their grades, there's going to be way too many candidates for the amount of spots. So we got to filter them up somehow. Let's write this cockamamie test and see, this is supposed to test how you think. No, it tests how you're able to write this particular one test, and it weeds people out. As far as when you actually get to law school, in my opinion, at least, David, I don't know if you feel differently. When I sat there, I thought to myself, this isn't teaching me squat about law. It's teaching me how to think, which is not a bad thing. I stopped thinking everything is black and white and obvious. I learned that everything is shades of gray, and I learned how to think beyond, like where this comma is, where this word is. That could change the whole complexion of everything. And that's what really opened my mind to law school.
Yeah, well, I'll defend the LSAT to a certain degree, um, for two reasons. One is it's trying to weed out people that don't have a certain type of thought process. A lot of it is logic. Do you have a logical mind? Can you make reasonable arguments, even if you don't believe them to be true? Can you argue a point or see a point or see another point of view, even if you don't agree with it, but you're not just, but you can logically work your way through that. And I think that's what some of the LSAT questions are designed to do. And also how fast you can think, because a lot of it is time oriented. That's one reason. The main reason I'll defend the LSAT is because I happen to do really well in the LSAT. That's what got me into law school.
Do you remember how you did on the LSAT, David?
Oh, well, I did it twice. And the first time I didn't really prepare, didn't do practice tests. I just sort of went with some friends. We said, okay, we should, thinking of law school, we should do the LSAT. And we got materials and spent a couple hours going through it and did a practice, and then boom. And I did not do very well. If my marks are really high, it probably could have been okay to get me into a decent school. But I didn't have, I wasn't like, marks in the 90s or anything like that. So I needed a good score too. So then I took one of those courses where you really get a whole bunch of practice and you learn the type of questions that you're likely to find. And you learn the speed, because that was my biggest thing. I just didn't appreciate how fast you have to answer and how you have to learn not to get bogged down on a question. Oh, I think I know it. I think I know it. And you're trying to figure it out and you waste 5 minutes on it. You're better off skipping it and go answer 5 other questions that you can do in a few seconds. So some of it's just learning how to write the test. And then I did the second time and I was like, 97th percentile. So that's why I'll defend the LSAT, because like the improvement was unbelievable, but I was better prepared and I understood what they were asking for.
I don't think I've ever told you the story then, but you and I have the exact same story, except I wrote the test the first time out of high school because my mom thought it'd be a good idea because I finished high school early. She says, you have another half year off, study for the LSAT, take it, you're ready for it. And I did prepare for it, but you know what? I didn't even have undergrad under my belt yet. I didn't have 1 year of undergrad yet. And I didn't have that logic skills. Like I was 17 years old when I wrote it and did not do very well. And then it got me so shell shocked, I left it. And then I wrote it again after my third year, I guess, of around my third year of undergrad. And I really busted my butt on that one. And I got a 97 as well. So, we're
there
tied.
You go.
Yeah.
So we were meant to be together.
It's funny how life works out that way. Now, there was a t-shirt I saw somewhere sometime. Family and friends do not let the loved ones become lawyers. Something around those lines.
Yeah.
I get asked all the time, would you let your son become a lawyer? Would you tell your best friend to become a lawyer? And I tell them often, you know what, compared to when I came into it, I would tell them to think long and hard about it. I would say, like, if you don't ever want to become a lawyer, but you do want to become something in business, if you want to go into politics, if you want to become a VP of a company, I noticed that people progress in the corporate world, in politics. It's really good to have a law degree under your belt because you got the reasoning skills. But if you want to do the grind, especially if you want to go into private practice and you want to build a client base and you want to learn the art of practicing law and everything that goes along with it, I would think long and hard about it because it's definitely not for everybody. That's usually the advice I give. You probably get asked the same question. What is your response to them?
Yeah, it's funny. I get asked all the time. A lot of it's from clients and agents. I've got a son, I got a daughter. They're trying to apply to law school. Can you talk to them? Can they meet with you or something? And my first answer is like, sure. Do you want me to talk them out of it? Like that's easier to some degree. But it really depends on why they want to go to law school. And I would encourage anybody to go to law school just for the reasons you outlined. Like it's a good education. You learn about a lot of things that go on in the world and how the world is run and what a law means. And, aside from the practical stuff we do, what it means to have laws and to have statutes and how they're drafted and how they're interpreted and all those things. So there's a lot of really good education that you get if you go to law school, if you decide to never practice. but you can translate that into so many other fields. I would also encourage anybody that I talk to, if they're thinking of going to law school, but unless they want to do criminal law or or something like that, I would encourage them to do a combined program and do business as well. Like if I were to go back in time, that's what I would do. I would get a business degree as well as the law degree. I think it's a great combination, and because there's so much that you're doing on the practical level as a lawyer, especially a commercial lawyer, real estate lawyer, where your clients are coming out of the business world, and you'll understand what they're talking about at a whole different level if you have that business background as well.
I agree with you 1,000%. I looked at the time into what was at the time the LLB MBA program, which is now the JD MBA program. Right. I had a BBA degree for 4 years of business, and I said to myself, to take the one extra year with the MBA, but a lot of the courses are duplicated with BBA, I don't think it's worth it for me. And I look back and didn't really have a regret, but I can definitely say getting a business degree, it definitely helped from the corporate commercial realm, being able to talk to business clients, help them understand, how economics, finance with their law, even though I can't give business advice, I understand their world. And I would tell anybody, if you get the opportunity to take business courses for your own self, learning accounting and finance, economics, managing your money, managing your life, if you're going to be a business owner, it's so vital. There's so many business. Think how many people, David, out there are business owners. They come and they rent the space and they buy a franchise, but have never studied anything business related ever in their lives. They may be a fantastic cook or a plumber or work in heating, for example, but they don't know about billing and accounts receivables and payables and finance and interest rates, etc. And that's what I would say to any business owner, out there, even taking night classes, get that background. I can certainly say I think I was a much stronger lawyer having that business background. I think I'm better off in the business education as a lawyer than the legal education, sadly enough.
Yeah, and if you think of it, what course did you take in law school that taught you how to manage a law firm, and operate a law firm, and to deal with employees, and to put in systems, and to deal with accounting systems and billing systems, and analyzing work in progress? Like, we don't learn all that stuff there. Most lawyers that we know, even like good successful lawyers, they're not always the ones that are all able to run a law firm. Okay. And we all know examples. There might be 20 lawyers in a law firm, but they might have one guy in there that's actually capable by default sometimes to manage that firm and to deal with it, because maybe he had some business background or knows how to run a small business. The rest of them just know how to be lawyers, and I'm no different. Like I was practicing, lawyer, working at a firm and then becoming a partner at a firm, and the management was left to other people. And I wasn't paying attention for, year after year, because I didn't have to. I just had my head down and working for the clients, trying to be a good lawyer, trying to get my deals closed, trying to become, the best lawyer I could be from that point of view. And all of a sudden, at some point, it's like, hey, wait a second. How do you run a law firm? Like, what's important? What are the systems?
And what law course ever teaches you how to market yourself as a lawyer, and how to deal with clients, and how to communicate, and how to deal with client expectations, and how to build a client base? None of that kind of stuff at all. And I remember being on Bay Street and watching these lawyers between years 5 and year 7, and they know their roles and know how to prepare files. If you set them out to the world, they don't know the first thing about getting a client or how to open a file and close a file and bill it. And I hear you. And that alarmed me at the time, which kind of segues me into my next part. I would say my best education was in articling. When I look back on it, and at the time, and mine as well as yours is a 1-year articling term where you really grinded it out. And I learned more in 1 week of articling than I did in 3 years of law school. And that's where I was mortified to see when they reduced that articling term to 8 months, saying that, they're ready enough. And, now they changed the rules about the pay scale because there were law firms that weren't paying people and people needed to have the articling terms. But what I tell a lot of young lawyers is my issue with articling and with the term and everything else, I think people are too driven from the money standpoint, David, and saying, if I only article for 8 months and I become a lawyer at the 8-month mark versus 1 year mark, I'm going to make a lot more money during those 4 months. I'd say, hold on. But you know what? For me, as a partner in a law firm, I think you're a weaker lawyer coming into it because you only have 8 months as an articling. I think, for me, you don't think of articling as an opportunity to make money. To me, it's apprenticeship where you're earning your stripes and you're coming in. And the more time you spend articling, the stronger you're going to be coming as an associate. I've had people that try to abridge the process. There's ways you can apply to the law society and shorten your articling term to even less than 8 months. And I told them, I don't think you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're not, you're trying to get there quicker, but you're hurting your future potentials because you're less marketable people. How do you feel about the articling process in general in your estimation?
Yeah, I tend to go with like the longer the articling period, the better. And I guess a year is enough probably because that's a pretty good opportunity. But I agree with you. It was a way better opportunity to learn how a lawyer functions and to actually do things that mattered on a file. But again, I should mention not all articling positions are equal. Some firms really let you get your hands dirty and dig in a file and give you responsibility for doing good practical work. And other places you're sort of window dressing and doing gopher jobs and going to pick up somebody's dry cleaning and and just putting briefs together. And and I don't mean by drafting them, I mean you're physically stapling them together and and putting exhibits together. And so all of that's important too, because you got to you got to learn how to sweep the floors before you stock the shelves, before you start selling goods, right? So you and there's no different in our profession, but you certainly want to get a combination of it. So you've got to be careful about where you're articling. But 8 months goes by really fast. You can't see a lot of transactions through because they live more than 8 months sometimes, but in a year you've got more of an opportunity. And hopefully anybody that's getting an articling position is somewhere where they get exposed to more than one thing or one lawyer, because and you need some time to have those experiences. So I don't think shortening it really does anybody a good service. And like you said, people have come to us and said, oh, I can abridge my articling and just do it in a month or something. And now all of a sudden they're a lawyer and you go get it and you're getting a job. And now you're a lawyer. Now here, do this, handle this file, stuff that you would have been exposed to as an article you haven't seen. And now you have high expectations of you to be able to perform and you can't. So now in your first year as a lawyer, you're looking really bad compared to other people that had better articling experience or had better practical experience. So you got to be careful what you wish for. I don't believe there's anything in fast tracking that really helps out anybody.
And that's where also I think that the danger when I can't tell you how many people in first year, second year law school knew what kind of lawyer they were going to be. They knew for sure the practice area they had to be in. And I tell people, even still, whenever you can get a more diversified articling process, do it, because you may find an area that interests you more. You'll have better experience. You'll have better knowledge. It'll serve you better. I was fortunate enough to be in a full service firm where I did both corporate real estate, litigation, insurance, and areas that I did not always like, but those experiences still stick with me to this day. I remember them, and I remember going through them. And one of the dangers I think is pigeonholing yourself too soon as a lawyer in what you think you're going to have as a niche practice. Because let's say you spend the first 3-4 years of your career in a certain practice, and you're like, hold on a minute here, this is not for me at all. I'm going to go off on a different route. The reality is you lose that time almost when you go back to a firm and you start under a new area, because you're really almost like art of articling. You're almost like a fresh lawyer again. And not every lawyer can handle that. So that's where I tell them, be more of a generalist and become more niche rather than starting with a niche and becoming a generalist.
Yeah, and that gets harder and harder to do because so many firms, and our firm's no different, are really specialized firms. Like gone are the days when there was a lot of lawyers that were general practitioners that are doing some real estate, they're doing some litigation, they're doing some family law, they're doing some estates. There are still some out there because they're trying to make a living the best way they can. But it's more by default. It's not by people choosing to do that and by because the profession's evolved over the year. There's so much to learn in any particular area that it's hard not to be a specialist. So when you're a young lawyer coming up, it's harder to get that exposure. Like I know certain people, like when, back in my day, in some ways they were better off going to work for a general practitioner, a sole practitioner, and being exposed to all that than going to, oh, it's a labor law firm and that's all you're going to learn, and you're not going to see any transactional stuff. Um, I don't think these days anybody gets encouraged to go article for a general practitioner, because the feeling out there is if someone's just a general practitioner, they're generally struggling with everything. They're not good enough to be a litigation lawyer. They're not good enough to be a family law lawyer. They're not good enough to be a real estate lawyer. They're not good enough to be an estates lawyer. So they're doing a little bit of everything. Whatever comes in the door, yeah, I can do it. But are they doing any of it really well? Like we're primarily a real estate boutique firm, and it's tough enough for us to keep up with all the changes that happen all the time in the evolution of a real estate practice.
But then we still have corporate commercial, and we have wills and estates. Now it's more basic wills and estates, but those are three areas, at least, of somebody, like we haven't had an articling student in a little while. Not every firm has them on. And that's part of the issue, is that there's a lot of demand for them, but there's not that many spots because people fail to recognize. Like I get asked all the time for it. And I tell people have to understand it's a big commitment for a law firm to take on this student. Not every firm is accepting of that, even though you have to fill out checklists and you swear to your obligations, but you have to provide a best possible learning experience, as much exposure, and the student has to fill out the form, the firm has to fill out, there's to be an assigned lawyer who's responsible for them. So it's a big undertaking, and a lot of law firms don't always want to do that. And for the simple matter is, it's a lot of learning curve with very little production. And that's one of the things I always find when interviewing lawyers. And that's one of the things I would always teach young lawyers out there. One of the biggest mistakes you can make out there when you're trying to get your first associate jobs is don't come in with the expectation that you're at the top and what are you going to do to woo me over here? For people that watch a lot of sports, you watch those free agents that are like 7 years, 10 years out, and they get paid hundreds of millions of dollars versus a rookie that's getting paid $250,000 $1 million in relative terms, obviously, in money wise. But you're not getting a $500 million contract straight out of the gate. You got to show yourself and earn your stripes. And that's one of the things I would say, a big knock on young lawyers that really turns me off when I interview, is they expect to be paid on potential, not on any kind of track record. And that's a very hard thing to do in this day and age. And so I would say a better attitude is coming in and, pay is not as important to me. Let me show you what I'm worth, because you show your worth, the money follows you at the end of the day.
Oh, it absolutely follows you. And you have to have some patience with it. Patience with yourself, first of all, because you're not going to have the success that you want to have day one. Everything takes you so long to do because you're not sure about your work. You're double checking, triple checking your work. You have to send it to a more senior lawyer to review, and then they send it back to you with a bunch of changes, and you got to rethink what you're doing. Everything you do takes a long time when you're starting out. And I don't think that's unique to the legal profession. I think you'd find that in most businesses and most professions. You have to start somewhere, and it is a grind because you do have a heavy workload, and what eventually will take you 1 hour to do, the first time you're doing it, it might take you 3 hours to do. So, how many 3-hour segments do you have in the course of the day? So you're working, 10, 12, 16 hours a day sometimes to do 6 hours of work. And then eventually that starts to change. You become more efficient, you become faster at it, you have more confidence, you don't need as much supervision and everything. So you have to be patient, number one, with yourself. And then number two, everybody else has to be patient with you to help you along, expecting you're going to have a learning curve, because everybody does. You and I are no different. I get exposed to something new. I'm still taking an awful long time to work my way through it the first couple times to figure it out. And there's always changes in our business.
And I think that's one of the biggest issues, I think, in our profession. And I know I've talked to business owners in all sorts of professions, and it's people coming up the ranks, and you can't teach hard work. A hard worker I feel like is instilled with them. It's really hard to motivate somebody and teach them. You need to go above and beyond. You don't look at your clock and punch in at 9, punch out at 5, especially as a lawyer. At the end of the day, are you prepared to put in the necessary time and effort to learn this and do this right? Because you do, you're going to grow. You're going to be able to do more complicated things at way less amount of time because you build out the experience. But people don't want to work hard and want to find those shortcuts. I find they don't realize they're making themselves more hard work by taking those shortcuts. But unfortunately, that's the volume of our society today, David. And I would say if there's anything I could teach I wish they taught a course in law school. It's how to work hard.
Yeah, it's almost like a lost art, because at some point there was an awakening of working so hard, working all these long hours. So if you figure out what my compared to my salary, if you break it down on an hourly level, I'm getting minimum wage or I'm getting less than minimum wage, and that might be true to some extent. But on the other hand, is what is your actual production during those long hours that you're doing? Because are you taking 16 hours to get 6 hours of work done? And when you're young, oftentimes that's the case. And then eventually you're going to get your 6 hours of work done in 6 hours because you're more efficient. But for the younger generation starting up, there's an impatience to that, and they think they're being taken advantage of. Whereas my generation, your generation, came out of an older generation that were working harder than we were, and we were taught to work hard and taught that this you have to put your time in, because the only way you're going to get better and become a true professional and master your craft is by putting the time in. And you grew up at larger firms than our firm, and so did I. And there was two different concepts: billable hours and unbillable hours, right? And when you're a young lawyer, you're spending a lot of unbillable hours to try and achieve the billable hours. And then as you get better, you're spending more and more time on your billable hours. And your unbillable hours are used for marketing, not for learning what the hell you're doing.
And something else that I think a lot of young lawyers don't realize is the overall time of billable, non-billable, like you said. Take, for example, you have a simple item you need to do, a lease amendment. And let's say this one, David, would take you an hour. It's a little more complicated one. It would take you an hour. For the student to do it or the young associate, let's say it would take them 2 to 3 hours. But it's not just their 2 or 3 hours, because then you're reviewing their work, marking it up, commenting, speaking with them. You're now putting in probably at least an hour into it. So your 1 hour is sunken regardless, but it's a different 1 hour plus their time spent into it. People don't factor in when somebody's mentoring you and helping you along, it's taking their time away from other things. And when you're putting in non-billable hours as a partner or a senior associate, you're doing it because you believe you're investing in somebody that wants to grow. But if that person shows no interest in growing whatsoever and doesn't appreciate it, at some point that mentor says, it's not worth my time. I'm going to put my time elsewhere. So one of the things I knew as a young lawyer, when I had those mentors, even if I didn't always agree with their comments, or, I thought they were a little hard on me, I knew they were still taking the time for me. And I'm very grateful, because in this day and age, it's harder and harder to find those mentors. And I think that's why there's a lot less articling positions, because people are saying, hey, I don't have enough time to breathe as it is, let alone teach somebody now. And I think that's one thing people have to understand about the law, the practice of law. You don't walk in and close transactions. Somebody has to apprentice you and teach you along the way. And that's a valuable relationship that I think that is missing and people forget about a lot.
Yeah, and if you look at it just from a purely business point of view, just in that example that you gave, the firm is probably losing money on that lease transaction.
1,000%.
Okay, when you add up the time spent by the associate lawyer plus the time spent by the mentor senior lawyer reviewing it compared to what you can actually bill a client for that, the firm lost money, right? So the firms are making those choices to lose money on files like that for a period of time, because that's the way you bring the next generation of lawyers along, and they need the training, they need the mentorship. I benefited from having some fabulous lawyers to work with, and they tore me apart when I was a young lawyer, about things, from a practical point of view, from a legal point of view, issues that I missed, drafting mistakes, all kinds of stuff. Did you ever think about that? Stuff I never would have thought of. And you can't just think, oh, they don't like me, they're not being fair to me. If you have that type of attitude, you're never going to get anywhere. You have to take it, even if it doesn't seem like it's constructive when they're handing it to you. You have to take it like it's constructive, because the intention is to make you better. And it should be like, thank you for spending the time to review my crappy piece of work, and I get it, thanks you, and I've learned from it, and I will try really hard not to repeat that mistake next time, because I just had a lesson. Thank you. And I had great mentors along the way that did that, in different techniques. Some were hard asses and some were really nice, and you learn from both, and you pick and choose how you're going to deal with people down the road. But I don't know. Do you know anybody that became a successful lawyer without having good mentorship?
Very rare, very rare. Like I met maybe one person my whole life that went and started their own firm like directly after articling, and just had a natural gift. And what that's kind of segues to my next point, and why they were able to do it. They had a strong business background and they knew how to communicate. And one of the things I was going to say from a law course that would really benefit, I tell a lot of young lawyers when I mentor them, I said, if you're going to go read any books, don't read it on law. Read the books on how to win friends, how to win over people, learn the art of communication. Learn, first and foremost, how to listen, how to take in, how to win people over, how to get them to like you. This will serve you throughout your legal practice, as far as working with your clients, with your fellow lawyers in your firm and in other firms, working with clerks, working with admin. This is very important. And part of the problem is in our profession is a lot of people may be very good lawyers and understand law and understand transactions, but they don't know how to deal with people. And in this day and age, in the year 2023 versus the year 1903, times are really different now. You have to be a lot more sensitive. You have to understand accommodation, and people come from different ways and different lives and different countries and cultures, religions, sexual orientations, etc. But you have to know how to speak to everybody. You got to learn how to communicate. And some people just don't know how to relate to people and don't know how to communicate. I feel if you don't have strong communication skills, no matter how experienced you are, how knowledgeable you are, you can get results. You're going to be really limited, because in this profession, you got to learn how to speak.
Yeah, and by speak, I think you mean communicate. When whatever form it happens to be, you
Emails,
have to.
text messages,
Right,
everything. It's social media. It's
right,
how you communicate with people in general. Absolutely.
right. And the current generation of wannabe lawyers and new lawyers have grown up in a world of emails and text messages and social media, and a lot of their communication, even with their friends, is through that. And you learn the hard way that some of that communication gets misinterpreted. It's not as clear. It's not as friendly. There's something about making eye contact and having a face-to-face meeting and discussion with somebody, whether it's on a Zoom call or live face-to-face, that's totally different than just having an exchange of texts or emails or letters or faxes or any other type of communication. You can have the most difficult issue with another lawyer, and if you just leave it to a back and forth in writing, you're not going to get nearly as far as if you can pick up the phone and talk to him, or even better, if you had a face-to-face, virtual or otherwise, where you can look each other in the eye and see facial expressions and have that type of communication, and you'll progress much faster to achieve whatever goal you set out. And it's a bit of a lost art. So I feel bad for the younger generation that's grown up without it. For you and I, we grew up with that, and we're learning the other side. We're learning the social media side and the texting side and everything. And so it's different, and we need that too, right? Because you can respond quickly and everything, but you got to be really careful with it. Text can be misinterpreted, no matter how many smileys you put on it. It could be harsh sometimes when it's not intended.
And look, there's no Kormans LLP if we don't do in-person seminars. Like, our law firm is built on the fact that we do and still continue to do in-person seminars. We speak to different professional groups and people. And, one thing Dave and I used to talk about a lot during COVID times when everything was virtual, you're talking to a bunch of little black screens, and occasional somebody has their video on, but very few do. And it could say 100 people, but I don't see no pictures. You don't even know people are logged in. It's very different I just did one today where I was in person. I saw 12 new faces. We're speaking, we're engaging. It's so, so different. And, young lawyers are telling me now, oh, I'm so lucky, or a young professional. I spoke to somebody working at a bank and an executive position. They're like, oh, I don't have to go to the office at all anymore. I'm just going to do everything virtual. I tell them, you know what? When you're building up experience and knowledge, you need to rub those elbows. That senior person comes into your office and at 4 o'clock and says, I'm working on something. I want to pick your brain. They won't think about picking up the phone the same way. But that person next door to you that is in the office, they will get that work. So as a young lawyer, David, I don't see how I would have cut it doing it in a virtual world, because everything I built from an experience and relationships in my law firms was by rubbing elbows in the kitchen or late at night when I was the only associate there in the office. There's a really big thing for young lawyers to learn by being in person with their mentors.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. Unfortunately, I don't know if we can completely put the genie back in the bottle at this point in our profession or in a lot of other businesses. But the trend is to try and get more people back in the office, etc. But I think it's really important for the younger generation to be there. And it's not just dealing with the lawyers that are there, but it's dealing with the clerks that are there, because the clerks help them out tremendously. We talk about mentorship and mentorship of lawyers and partners as we grew up. I had tremendous education to be as a lawyer just from the clerks that I worked with. They've got a certain level of knowledge that's different from what a lawyer knows about things. They're in the files, they're in the gutters. They know what they have to do on a practical level to get things closed. You learn a lot from clerks too, and they have tremendous experience, and it's a great resource for lawyers. So it's another good reason, to be there, and you find out about stuff beyond your own files when you're there. When you're at home, you only hear about your files, and except for the odd meeting when, like, we have our lawyers meetings and our staff meetings and things like that, so we raise certain issues. But on a day-to-day basis, when you're in the office, you hear about other people's problem files, because they just run something past you or they tell you a story. You learn so much more beyond your own file experience when you're there, and that's not unique to the legal profession. I've had that conversation with, when I'm doing seminars and webinars for real estate agents too. Like, go to the office. When you're in the office, you hear about everybody else's problems on their transactions or unique things that come up. You learn so much more beyond what your own transactions are when you're there.
I remember being a young lawyer, and not a lawyer yet. I'm still articling. Okay, I'm still articling, and I have very little direct communication with the clients at this point. I get little drib and drabs of certain files, and I got to do little pieces of work and hand it in. And I don't know what happens to it after that or what the big picture is. I just know I got to take care of my sections. I remember the first time I got a buzz at like 10 o'clock in the morning. A client is here in the boardroom. They'd like to come see you. I started sweating buckets, and I'm like, what do you mean they want to see me? And I remember the first time I had to see a client in person, I literally wanted to jump out of that window, David. Like, and I'm up on the 50th floor, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And I remember how much, and I was shy as a teenager, and I grew out of that as a young adult, but still it felt very, very different. And now I'm trying to think, imagine in this new world where if a person works virtually their whole time and has never ever met a client and they're in person, you're now a year two, year three, and all of a sudden a client shows up at your office having that same feeling, except you've been doing this for a while. That's where you have to learn to interact with people in person. Like, you're not going to ever escape that part of it. And the sooner you learn it, the better.
Yeah. And, you get thrown into some unique positions sometimes as a lawyer. I remember when I first joined a firm downtown, I started at a small firm, really working for one lawyer for my first years. And then I joined a firm that had about 15, 17 lawyers, something like that. And I don't think I was there for more than a couple weeks. And one of the senior real estate partners grabs says, come on, you got to come with me to a meeting. I'll tell you about it on the way. And we were going down to a big firm. We were downtown, but we were going to another big law firm downtown into their boardroom. He says, I'm your client because I'm involved on a real estate transaction and we're having a problem with our partners on it. So you're my counsel at this meeting. I said, but I don't even know what this meeting's about or what this is. Well, as we're walking, I'll tell you a little about it, but just, you'll follow my lead, but I need a lawyer there. And I walk into this boardroom and there's like 3 or 4 other parties. Everybody's got their lawyer there. One of them is the former lawyer, senior lawyer that I worked for my first 3 years, because he happens to be an investor in this. He's there, and now I'm up against him. And I've been out like for 3 years. I don't even know what the file was. I never even read a piece of paper yet. And the lawyer says, just follow my lead. Whatever, when I do, you do. And they started talking. They were about a minute into it. And the lawyer I'm with, who's my client, starts yelling, telling everybody to screw off. That's it. We're out of here. Grabs his file. We're leaving. So I follow. We go out. We're leaving. We go into the hall. And he said, now what? He says, well, I'm just going to wait here for a couple of minutes because they're going to come after us and beg us to stay and be more reasonable in their position. And I go, I don't know. Like, that was pretty heated in there. I don't. He was just, just wait. And sure enough, we didn't have the elevator didn't even arrive yet, and there they are begging us to come back in. Everybody calmed down. We're much. So wow, I learned a great thing about the art of negotiating that day. And and I can tell that story 35 years later because I still remember it. And and this was just, it was brilliant. He had it planned before we ever got there. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was going to get in there, push a few buttons, get them to start yelling, he knew who he was dealing with, and then make a scene and then get his way because everybody's going to calm down.
The art of communication, the art of negotiation. Now, would you like another laugh, David? As a young lawyer coming through the ranks, did the thought of work-life balance ever enter your vocabulary?
I don't think that was a concept yet. For the first 25 years I practiced, I don't think anybody had invented it. You hadn't written a book about it yet. You hadn't.
No. I mean, I can tell you, David, I articled in 2002. There was no idea of work-life balance. There was work till you pretty much drop and pray you're going to get hired back. That was the idea. And it's amazing, years later now, you develop the work-life balance once you get your footing down, once you feel comfortable, once you build an established practice, you've been out for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Now they're teaching them in law school, in undergrad, in high school on work-life balance. And my feeling is maybe we were one extreme one way, but it's going the extreme the other way. And as far as work-life balance goes, it's more life balance, and work is kind of like the secondary. And the problem is when work takes the back seat, there becomes a ceiling of how far you can grow. You want to be a farmer and plant crops. The more time you put into your crops, the better your production will be. If you're like, you know what, I want to go sit on my couch, I need more balance right now, and I don't want to put that much into the crops, your yield's not going to be that far. And that's one of the things I can tell you as a lot of young lawyers. I even see lawyers 10 years out, and I'm shocked sometimes at their level of experience, what they're able to do, because they have not put that time in. So I think we're going to see a trend one day going the other way, where work-life balance will go more towards work because people want to get ahead again.
Well, in my humble opinion, I think there's a lot of merit in work-life balance, and I think there's a lot of merit in working hard. And I think you need to do both. And I don't think that one precludes you from doing the other. I think the advances in technology that we now enjoy in our profession and our lives in general should allow us to do both, work hard and still achieve a work-life balance of some sort, whatever that is for you. When I started out in practice, I think it was way more difficult because we had to be in the office. Our files were massive. They were all paper files. I was working on commercial transactions. Most commercial transactions I had were 3 or 4 accordion files. You couldn't just grab it and take it home and then continue working at home. You had to be at the office. No, it was really hard to take stuff home with you because the technology didn't exist. We were buried in paper, right? And you just needed your resources there. So you didn't have that option. So you had to be in the office early. You had to stay late. You had to come in on weekends if you wanted to do some work. It was really hard just to take a piece of it, a file home, and just finish it later. So those days, thankfully, are gone. Okay, like in our office, we're virtual. We don't buy paper anymore. Everything's accessible. So that excuse is gone. So yeah, you can still work hard. Some of that might be from home. Some of that might be, okay, I got to get home, so I got to get my kid to hockey practice. So between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock, I'm busy. But once I'm home, the kids go back to sleep. I can still work from 9 o'clock to 11 if I want that night because I've got everything there. I don't have to run back to the office to do it. If you there's it'll you still, it's important to have that balance, but there's still, especially if you're a young lawyer, you got to work hard or you're not going to be successful. So you got to figure out how you're going to work hard, when you're going to work hard. But I think you've got way more options just because of the technology that allows us to work from wherever we are.
Imagine, David, 20 years ago, for most of us, we did not get emails on our phones. Think about that for a moment. You left the office. When you left the office, the emails stayed there. You had phone calls. The phone calls stayed there. You had to call into your phone to call your answering machine if you even had that option, depending on where you were. So in some ways, you could be anywhere in the world now and answer in 2 seconds. But on the other hand, you're always accessible. So there's that trade-off. But I agree with you. There's part of it you have to be in the office because you couldn't risk missing that information. But on the other hand, now there's no excuses. You can put in that time. You don't have to be in the office. But for somebody that, especially as a young professional, you're a young lawyer, you're a young accountant, and you clock out at 5 p.m., you don't do weekends, that's when a lot of transactions happen. That's when the S hits the fan. And if you're not accessible, I don't know how far you're going to get. So it's finding that balance and understanding that, sometimes, especially when you're younger, you got to put in that effort. Now, in summarizing today's episode, I was going to ask you a final key question, because I got to ask this one all the time. What is the most important thing I should look for in picking a law firm as a young lawyer? And it's funny because generally I only hear one criteria, which is compensation, money, bonuses, But there's so many other things at the end of the day that I've seen. I've been around this practice long enough. You've been around it long enough. And sure enough, that these factors end up being the real deciding factors. You could pay somebody all the money in the world, but if they're not happy in these particular fields, they don't last. What I came up with was the size of the law firm. So it could be the number of people, number of lawyers, number of clerks, etc., the different areas of law that they practice. If somebody wants to practice in a certain area and that firm does not practice it, they may not get there. They may practice it, but they may have a supplementary area they want to learn. The location is still important. Whether you are hybrid, completely in person, or think you're fully virtual, you still have to consider in the back of your mind, if you are hybrid and you live, 2 hours away from your office, and then reality is you got to be in the office once a week, twice a week, 4 times a week, it's going to make a big difference. The type of work, quality of work that you're doing, as far as, the types of transactions you want to do, and you feel you're getting those kind of exposures, what kind of people you're working with. Now, I said the number of people, but do you actually enjoy the people you work with? Do you enjoy your colleagues? What kind of atmosphere? Are they friendly? Do they do outings together? Are they close with each other? Or is everybody on their own island and everybody's separate apart? Nobody helps one another. What kind of clients do they have? Like, is it mainly banks? Is it mainly landlords? I tell people you need to factor in a lot of things, because at the end of the day, not one particular area, I think, should decide which law firm you work in. But if you consider that balance thing we just talked about, I think you have to have a balance in work of different criteria, because ultimately you'll be happiest if you have that cohesion of several items. If you're only getting one thing out of it, but so many others are lacking, eventually you'll become resentful and you won't stay. And the danger is, in this day and age, You don't want to jump year to year, 2 years, 2 years, because I know David and I talk about this all the time. We get these applications in, we look at the resumes, 10 years, 5 different firms, 2 years every firm. What's going to happen? They'll stay with us for 2 years, they'll be gone. And we've tried that experiment. Maybe we'll be different. It's never different generally. So people have to consider the long-term picture. There is something to be said still of being in one place for a long time, building roots. And to do that, you have to be happy.
Well, and you and I have been on enough interviews of potential lawyers together to know you, so you'll know the next thing I'm going to say. One of the things I ask people all the time when we're meeting with them is like, are you looking for a job or are you looking for a career? You know, are you looking just to get something on your resume and get some experience, and then while you're working for us, you're looking around because you're not sure what you want to do or something? Or are you looking for a place that's giving you an opportunity to really build your career, become a good lawyer, build a clientele base, work with some good lawyers, work with good people, and build a career? And you and I have that philosophy about our firm, that we're trying to, every time we hire someone, we're trying to hire someone for life. You know, like whatever you'd be looking for, you know, after your first year, second year, third year, if you're missing something, let's try and fill that gap here. Let's try and do it within, as opposed to you having to go elsewhere to think that you got to chase it somewhere else. Like, why not here? So I think that's a great opportunity that we offer to people at our firm. And, you know, it doesn't always work out with everybody, but that's certainly our attitude. Like, you know, we want people to join us that want a career, not a job. We're not looking to churn people. We got to hire, we're busy, we got to hire a lawyer for a year or two, and then we'll leave, or we'll get rid of them, and then we'll hire the next one. Like, we're not looking to do that. A lot of firms are. Big firms are. You know, big firms hire 20 articling students, looking to hire back 5 to 10, maybe in a good year, but they're hoping that 5 or to 10 they hire back are going to, like, 1 or 2 of them are actually going to stick with the firm beyond 3 years or 5 years, and maybe only one of that group of 20 is actually going to become a partner at some point in time. And they know those are the numbers, but they're going to hire the 20 the next year as well, looking for the one gem. So you want to play that game. A lot of people do. Know what you're playing, though. You know, eyes wide open. You want to go to a small boutique-ier firm where there's opportunities to really develop and grow and become a lawyer, become part of a firm. Look for that. But you got to know what you're looking for and what they're offering you. And it's not, you know, compensation should be fair and reasonable, but it should be not the number one priority. The compensation will look after itself because you'll earn it.
I know plenty of people that have taken big compensation packages, going to another place and thinking to themselves, wow, you know, this is going to be great for me. And then they show up within their first week and they say, oh my Lord, what did I do? I'm doing something that's way out of my league. I don't like these people. I don't feel comfortable. And I've heard the stories, you know, when you get called into a boardroom on a Thursday or Friday and you get handed a box and you're like, sorry, you know, we had an expectation of you and we read your resume and you talked a good talk, but we're not seeing it. So here's your 2 weeks notice. Here's your box. Thank you very much. Today's your last day. It's the worst feeling in the world, I'm sure. And I remember once seeing a lawyer that a couple of years, 3 years in, David, and so shell-shocked from the practice of law that went to sit in his basement for 2 years and played video games. Was just so done. So I tell people all the time, whatever your profession is, whether it's a lawyer, accountant again, plumber, whatever, you know, whatever realm you're in, nurse, doctor, etc., it really doesn't matter. It matters to you. Wake up in the morning, are you happy with life? When you go to sleep at night, are you happy with life? You know, in order to make money, you're going to do things that you don't always love per se, because we all can't sit on the beach at Tahiti and drink pina coladas all day, certainly. But overall, are you happy with your existence? And if you're so miserable that you don't want to wake up in the morning and you're so unhappy going to sleep and your mind keeps racing and, you know, you have that constant feeling of dread, something's not right and you have to look within it. And, you know, sometimes it's the profession and sometimes it's the place you're working. Maybe it's the type of work that you're doing. And many times it's your own mindset. At the end of the day, you'll go from law firm to law firm as a lawyer, and you'll try different aspects and work with different people, and you still have that same feeling of dread. And at some point, you have to look at the mirror and say, I can run away from this, but I cannot run away from me. So I tell the young lawyer, if I'm going to get the one last piece of advice, is look out for number one, eat well, exercise, drink your water, take care of your body, take care of your mind, so you can be the strongest lawyer you can be. Because if you ain't sleeping and you ain't eating and you're collapsing every day, it's really hard to take on any kind of work, let alone, vital, crucial, mind pressing work.
Yeah. On the other hand, there is a level of stress and anxiety that you have to take on if you're going to be successful. Okay. Because files are challenging, clients are challenging, and that's the nature of the beast. And that's not unique to being a lawyer. If you're going to be successful in any business, you're going to have days that you're just going to dread it, and certain parts of your business that you're going to dread. So you have to really analyze what you're doing and how you're dealing with it, and what is an insurmountable amount of it that you're really not enjoying. You don't like the practice, or that is different. Then there's a certain amount of it that just comes with the territory. Just because you're going to be successful, if you're going to be a good lawyer and you're going to be a successful lawyer, you're going to be in demand. You're going to be in demand within your firm because everybody wants you to work on their file. You're going to be in demand by clients. Everybody wants to give you more stuff. And that puts a lot of stress on you, a lot of pressure. Because you're good, you create that stress. So it's sort of a good thing. It is a good thing. It's a compliment. But you have to learn how to manage it and deal with it. And you have to manage your time, manage your life, manage expectations of those that are making those demands of you as well. So you can meet those timelines and achieve the results. Okay, so you really have to do a careful analysis of why you're dreading things or why you're stressing, because some of it is actually a positive. You brought it onto yourself because you're good. Now figure out how to manage it.
You think
as
about
opposed to think about walking away from it.
Think about us as lawyers. Most time when people call us, is because there's a problem. When you call your doctor and you want to see your doctor, because there's a problem. When you call your accountant, usually it's because there's a problem. It's not because there's good news. And I would say if there's one mind shift I had, David, as a young lawyer, is that when I started off, every client's problem was my problem, and I took it to heart. I learned along the way when someone called me and they said, we got a problem. Like, no. You got a problem. I'm here to support you, but it ain't my problem, because I'm going to go to sleep tonight the same way. And that's where, think about it. If you're a doctor and you have to tell somebody, the patient's family, that someone passed, if you internalize all of that all the time, you're going to lose your mind with it. So you got to learn to disengage a bit and keep in mind that it's a business and it's professional. And that's the only way to do it, because you internalize it mentally and it becomes your issue. It'll never, ever end that way. So I think that's what at the end of the day separating, the best lawyers or the second best lawyers from others, is being able to take on issues and keep a level mind and still smile.
Yeah. And look, I've been doing this for 38 years now. And what keeps me motivated is after 30 years, I've only gotten to number 2. So I don't know how many more years I'm going to be doing this, but I'm still motivated to try and get to number 1, get a new shirt. So you keep on going, because you never perfect it. That's why they call it the practice of law, because we never achieve perfection. There's always something new coming along, and we're not unique. There's, other businesses have the same thing. We evolve. Everything evolves in our profession. We got to evolve with it and keep growing with it. And you keep practicing till you get it right. But as soon as you think you got it right, they change the rules on you.
One of the things I talk about in my upcoming book, where I say, Allen Iverson said, it's not a game. It's not a game. It's practice. Just practice. But if you keep thinking of everything you're doing as practice and you keep practicing, it really puts into perspective where it feels a lot less pressure. And when you put less pressure on yourself, you'll probably do much better at it. David Korman, I got to tell you, it is a privilege and an honor to be your partner, your brother, your friend. And now that we've scared the bejeebers out of everybody becoming a young lawyer, I was trying to tell them now we're going to bring you in closer as we end the episode, but you have our contact information at Kormans LLP, David Korman, Jonathan Cohen. You have questions as a young student, or you're thinking about going back to school, becoming a lawyer, you have questions. We're happy to answer what we can. So please reach out to us, send us your comments on the practice of law. And we'll see you all back real soon on the Chosen Life podcast. Thank you as always, David.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.